Good afternoon. My name is Jaime del Val. I'm coordinator of the Metabody project, artist, philosopher, activist, co-organizer of the Beyond Humanism conference series. And this is the first of a series of videos related to critical and creative approaches to the COVID-19 pandemic, which I want to share online as a kind of workshop. You might be wondering about the location. We are now in the quarantine of the pandemic in Madrid, which is one of the epicenters of the pandemic nowadays. 1st of April 2020, in the center of Madrid. This is, just to let you know, the terrace of my roof house. And here in the open air, I want to share with you some insights onto how to explore, during the time of the quarantine, ways of moving and perceiving, of sensing yourself and your surrounding in a radically creative manner, with just the most subtle variations in how you can move. This has to do with the idea that, maybe instead of just relying upon communication technologies that tend to be opaque surveillance technologies, we can also seek recourse to another kind of spectrum of embodied activity, of perceptual activity, in which the richness of our experience can come up in different ways. Now, first of all, proprioception. Have you ever heard about proprioception? Maybe not. It is perhaps the most important sense that we have. It can be understood as a specific sensory modality by which the body senses its own motion. So I can sense my own movement because the body is full with internal sensors of elongation of the muscles and changes in the tendons and joints. But proprioception, which is itself an incredibly complex field, is also the site, of course it's the site where the body senses its own motion, right? But it's also the site where sensations from outside, exteroceptive senses, vision, hearing and so forth, but also from the inside, interoceptive, come together in the body's capacity to move and to respond to these other sensing modalities. So this means, on the one hand, that our experience is always a kind of complex field and process and matrix of changing multisensory integration. Every single thing we do, even just holding a glass, is a very complex process of multisensory integration. But it's in proprioception, as our own sense of movement, where it all becomes alive and integrated in something in which we are completely entangled with the world. If I touch the bread in the morning when I go to the bakery, how do I feel the sense of texture? Well, I feel it through my own muscle tissue deformations, my sense of effort. Of course, also through texture, which is more a tactile issue. But tactility is always mostly entangled with proprioception, with the internal deformation of the tissues. Most of the things that are normally called tactile are in fact proprioceptive. If I hug someone, that person has already become part of my internal tissue deformation, part of my proprioceptive memory, which is also a kind of direct perception that doesn't necessarily go through brain representations, so to speak. In a future lesson we will deal with how I see proprioception as also a fundamental evolutionary mechanism. But for now let's focus on how it's building really a core matrix of our embodied experience, in the sense of how everything we sense proprioceptively is also connected to our own movement in relation to it. Let's consider even some visual inputs. Let's consider, for example, how I have a sense of distance in the street I walk. It has to do also with a proprioceptive muscular memory of the sense of effort and the sense of muscular distance of going through that space, and of proprioceptive orientation of the body in that space. Right? It's through that capacity to move in that space that I also integrate vision and hearing and all the set of multisensory modalities that are involved in perceiving something as complex as a street, that is integrated in the proprioceptive matrix, without which nothing of that would make any sense at all. So, as a first introduction, I would like to invite you to start just experiencing your proprioception, which maybe you have never done before. Try to do something, some gesture where you feel your muscles. Try to find your muscles. Where are they? Do you feel something internal? Can you find out something internal at all? Something that is not just surface skin sensation, but where you feel tensions and torsions of the muscles. Take your time to explore this, and of course keep doing it after we end the video if you want. You could explore it in terms of changes of pressure at the feet on the ground, which are endlessly varied. If you start exploring them, it's an active exploration, of course. It's never just a kind of external listening. Proprioception is, I would say, even more than quantum mechanics, is absolutely entangling the observer and the observed. You can listen to it in terms of the feedback that your clothes are giving to you as you move. And because you move, the clothes will be giving you a little caress, right? Or a pressure that is inviting you to maybe explore a new torsion here and there. Now, what's interesting, you can also explore all of this standing still. Why? Well, because the body is always moving, that you want it or not. Most of the movements the body does are actually non-conscious. So you can just stay there, sit there, and explore the tiny fluctuations of posture that are happening all the time. Well, of course, breathing is changing the whole posture, but something will release somewhere at some point. You can feel changing pressures of the chair or the ground or the table. And this expresses the fact that the fundamental state of the body is not stillness, it's fluctuation. We will later expand in some other lessons or workshops or sessions on fluctuation as the ontological primary of the universe, and how our proprioception is a wonderful expression of it, and of how consistency comes up in that openness. So if proprioception is our primordial sense of self, and of body in motion, and of agency also, well, the wonderful thing about it, and the extraordinary thing, is that it's enormously blurry. It's consistent, but it's incredibly open, ambiguous, undefined. It's about zones of tension and torsion distributed everywhere. Mostly we don't feel it. Why? Because we have inherited, tragically, a culture of immobility and proprioceptive atrophy. This is our inheritance of millennia of geometric environments, and especially since the onset of perspectival vision in the Renaissance. Our smartphones are still an inheritance of the fixed points of vision of Renaissance perspective, which have increasingly established a culture of immobile bodies. Funnily enough, civilization, or the measure for it, has been equated to the degree of atrophy in our bodies. And yet this is problematic, because following embodied and inactive cognition theories, how we move is how we think, which means moving in certain ways will imply thinking in certain ways. If we are immobile, what kind of thinking do we perform? Did the logos, or say logical reasoning, emerge from grid-like environments when we started to become aligned with linear movements? But the body can do much more than that. So our proprioception has the capacity. The body is always like a flock. Proprioception is a field with endless zones of tension and torsion, and the body is constantly readjusting the field in multiple ways by far exceeding rational consciousness. Even if I am walking in a street and I seem to be displacing in the street, the body is always doing many things at once. I'm talking on the phone, I'm gesturing with a friend, I'm looking at a window shop, and who knows what else, and the balances are constantly readjusting. But the body is always out of balance, I claim. What the body does is not just struggling for balance, it's actually activating its multiple tensional and torsional zones. But we can take that to new thresholds of complexity and regain a richness that we have lost through millennia of alignments with geometric environments. What I claim, and I advance here a little bit of my theory of archaeoproprioception, I claim that we have inherited from 4 billion years of bacterial swarms and of evolution a self-organizing complexity which is built in our decentralized nervous systems as well, so that the body moves well in excess of rational conscious decisions, and we can let this unfold and evolve and let the 1,000 counterpoints in the body, the tensional and torsional zones, unfold. In order to do this, we need to develop improvisation technologies where we can let this capacity unfold and gradually come out. But we will leave this for the next lesson, because now we have the applauses at 8 o'clock in Madrid to our health system workers during the pandemic. Good afternoon. Thank you.